Not being happy with where my life is going, I decided to change it, and I took it and put it in my own hands. I had work clothes on, and I went to work and built some cars that no one's ever seen before.
For years, Chad Hiltz was known as one half of the duo behind Rust Valley Restorers, a man whose passion for old cars, raw craftsmanship, and unfiltered honesty made him a fan favorite. On screen, he appeared tough, driven, and unstoppable. Someone who could bring forgotten machines back to life with sheer willpower. But behind the grease, the grit, and the cameras, Chad's life was far more fragile than most people ever realized. As the show gained popularity, viewers assumed success had finally settled in. The fame, the business growth, the recognition, it all looked like proof that Chad's hard work had paid off. Yet quietly, things were beginning to change. The pressures of reality television, business struggles, and personal battles started taking a toll that couldn't be fixed with a wrench or a fresh coat of paint. At 54, Chad Hiltz's life looks very different from what fans once expected. The man who built cars from scrap was now facing challenges that couldn't be restored so easily. Friendships shifted, dreams were tested, and the weight of everything he had built began to feel heavier than ever. What makes his story so emotional isn't just what he lost, it's what he held on to through it all. This isn't just a story about television fame or classic cars. It's about resilience, loneliness, and the quiet strength it takes to keep going when the cameras stop rolling. And once you see what Chad Hiltz has been through, it's almost impossible not to feel it in your heart. Long before television crews arrived at Rust Valley, Chad Hiltz was already living a life defined by grit, survival, and an unbreakable connection to old cars. He wasn't chasing fame or recognition. He was chasing purpose. Growing up, Chad found comfort in machines that others had given up on. Rusted frames and broken engines didn't discourage him, they spoke to him. In many ways, restoring cars became a reflection of how he saw life itself. Damaged, imperfect, but still worth saving. When Rust Valley Restorers debuted, audiences were instantly drawn to Chad's rough-around-the-edges honesty. He didn't fit the polished image of a television personality, and that authenticity became his appeal. Viewers saw a man who spoke his mind, worked with his hands, and lived without filters. The show presented a version of success, business growth, public recognition, and the validation of being seen, but it also introduced pressures Chad had never experienced before. As the cameras followed his day-to-day life, Chad faced expectations that went far beyond restoring cars. Production schedules tightened, business decisions became public, and personal moments were no longer private. What viewers didn't see was how exhausting this new reality became. Chad was still running a challenging operation, still managing financial risks, and still carrying the emotional weight of years spent building something from nothing. Fame didn't replace stress, it amplified it. Behind the scenes, Chad struggled with the emotional cost of visibility. Every disagreement, every setback, and every mistake was now subject to public opinion. People who had never met him felt entitled to judge his choices. For someone who valued independence and solitude, this constant scrutiny was overwhelming. Chad didn't complain publicly, but those close to him noticed changes. The energy that once fueled his passion began to wear thin. Another layer of pressure came from relationships tested by business and fame. Long-standing dynamics shifted as success introduced new expectations and conflicts. Decisions that once felt simple became complicated by cameras, contracts, and public perception. Chad often found himself caught between staying true to his instincts and meeting the demands of a show that had its own momentum. That tension slowly eroded the joy he once found in his work. As time passed, the image fans had of Chad began to diverge from his reality. On screen, he was still the tough, determined builder. Off-screen, he was exhausted. The constant hustle left little room for rest or reflection. Physical labor took a toll on his body, while emotional strain weighed on his mind. For someone who had always pushed through pain without complaint, this period tested his limits. At the height of the show's popularity, many assumed Chad had finally made it. But success doesn't always bring peace. For Chad, it brought questions he wasn't prepared to answer. What did he want his life to look like? Was the spotlight worth the cost? Could he keep going at this pace without losing himself entirely? These questions lingered quietly, even as the cameras continued rolling. This stage of Chad Hiltz's life reveals a truth rarely acknowledged in reality television. What looks like success from the outside can feel like pressure on the inside. Chad didn't lose his passion. He was buried under expectations. The man who once found freedom among rusted cars was now navigating a world that demanded constant output, constant attention, and constant resilience, and yet, even in this struggle, Chad kept going. Not because it was easy, but because giving up had never been his nature. The same stubborn determination that brought broken cars back to life pushed him forward through uncertainty and exhaustion. This was only the beginning of a much harder, one that would change his life in ways few fans ever expected. As the excitement surrounding Rust Valley Restorers continued, the weight on Chad Hiltz's shoulders grew heavier with each passing season. What once felt like an opportunity to showcase his passion slowly transformed into a relentless cycle of pressure. Running a business is demanding on its own, but doing so under constant observation introduced a new layer of stress that Chad was never prepared for. Every decision carried consequences that extended beyond the shop and into the public eye. The emotional strain began to show in subtle ways. Chad became more guarded, more withdrawn, and noticeably exhausted. Long hours in the shop were followed by restless nights filled with worry, financial uncertainty, production demands, and the challenge of keeping everything afloat created a sense of instability that lingered constantly. For a man who prided himself on self-reliance, asking for help didn't come naturally. Instead, he carried the burden quietly, believing it was his responsibility alone. One of the most painful aspects of this period was the strain it placed on relationships. Long-standing friendships were tested as business pressures intensified. Trust became complicated when cameras were present, and personal disagreements were magnified by the presence of an audience. Chad found himself navigating conflicts that weren't just about cars or money, but about identity, control, and respect. These tensions slowly chipped away at the sense of camaraderie that had once made the shop feel like home. Physically, the years of hard labor began to catch up with him. Restoring vehicles is demanding work, requiring strength, endurance, and focus. Chad's body bore the marks of decades spent lifting, welding, and grinding. Injuries that once healed quickly now lingered, adding to the exhaustion. Yet, he pushed through, driven by pride and a deep sense of responsibility to keep everything running. Rest felt like a luxury he couldn't afford. Emotionally, Chad struggled with the loss of autonomy. The very thing that had drawn fans to him, his independence, felt increasingly compromised. Schedules, creative choices, and even moments of rest were influenced by outside forces. The shop that once symbolized freedom now felt like a place of constant obligation. Chad wrestled with conflicting feelings of gratitude and resentment, unsure how to reconcile success with the personal cost it demanded. As the pressure mounted, moments of doubt became unavoidable. Chad questioned whether continuing at the same pace was sustainable. He wondered if the version of success he had achieved aligned with the life he truly wanted. These internal conflicts were deeply personal, yet played out quietly behind the scenes. To the public, Chad remained the same tough, determined figure. Inside, he was searching for clarity in a world that no longer felt stable. Eventually, circumstances forced Chad to slow down. Whether through exhaustion, personal reflection, or the realization that something had to change, he reached a point where continuing as before was no longer an option. This pause was not an act of defeat, but of survival. For the first time in years, Chad had to confront the reality that resilience also means knowing when to step back. This period marked a critical turning point. Stepping away from constant production and public exposure allowed Chad space to reflect on what truly mattered. It wasn't fame, validation, or public approval. It was peace, purpose, and the simple satisfaction of working with his hands without pressure. This realization didn't come easily, but it reshaped his understanding of success. Chad Hiltz's story during this time exposes the hidden cost of reality, television, and entrepreneurial pressure. Behind every season and every episode is a real person absorbing the weight of expectations. Chad didn't break, he adapted. And while the road ahead remained uncertain, this moment of reckoning set the stage for a quieter, more introspective of his life. Stepping away from the constant noise of production gave Chad Hiltz something he hadn't felt in years: silence. It wasn't an easy silence at first. Without cameras, deadlines, and public expectations, he was left alone with his thoughts. For someone who had spent decades staying busy to avoid slowing down, this pause was unsettling. But over time, that quiet became a space for healing and reflection. Life away from the spotlight forced Chad to redefine his daily rhythm. There were no rigid schedules dictating his every move. Instead, his days became centered around the basics, working at his own pace, reconnecting with nature, and finding comfort in routines that didn't require validation. The shop was still there, but it felt different now. It was no longer a stage. It was a refuge. Emotionally, this period was both freeing and painful. Chad had to confront feelings he had long suppressed: exhaustion, disappointment, and a sense of loss for the version of life he once imagined fame would bring. Accepting that success didn't deliver the happiness he expected was difficult. Yet, acknowledging that truth allowed him to let go of resentment and begin rebuilding his sense of self. Physical healing also became a priority. Years of relentless labor had taken their toll, and slowing down gave Chad the opportunity to listen to his body. Tasks that once felt routine were now approached with care. Rest, once viewed as weakness, became a necessity. This shift wasn't about giving up. It was about preserving what remained of his strength for the years ahead. During this quieter phase, Chad rediscovered why he fell in love with restoring cars in the first place. Without pressure to perform or impress, he could focus on craftsmanship rather than output. Each project became personal again. The satisfaction came not from deadlines or ratings, but from the simple act of bringing something broken back to life. In that process, Chad found pieces of himself he thought he had lost. Isolation, however, had its challenges. The absence of constant interaction and recognition left moments of loneliness. Fame had once provided a steady stream of attention, even if it was stressful. Learning to exist without that external affirmation required emotional adjustment. Chad had to rebuild his confidence from within rather than relying on public approval. This internal work was quiet, slow, and deeply personal. Connections with people also shifted during this time. Relationships that endured were those built on genuine understanding rather than convenience or exposure. Chad became more selective about who he allowed into his life, valuing honesty and loyalty over ambition. These deeper connections offered support without expectation, reminding him that success isn't measured by visibility but by authenticity. As months passed, Chad began to accept that his life would never return to what it once was, and that was okay. The of constant filming and public scrutiny had ended, but it didn't erase everything he had built. Instead, it reshaped his priorities. He no longer chased recognition. He chased balance. This stage of Chad Hiltz's journey reveals a powerful truth about reinvention. Sometimes growth doesn't come from expansion, but from contraction. By stepping back, Chad created space for clarity. By letting go of noise, he rediscovered meaning. And while the future remained uncertain, one thing became clear. He was no longer defined by a television show, but by the resilience that carried him through its aftermath. As Chad Hiltz moved deeper into this new phase of life, something quietly powerful began to take shape: acceptance. Not the kind that comes from giving up, but the kind that comes from understanding. He no longer measured his worth by productivity, public attention, or outside approval. Instead, value came from waking up without pressure, without deadlines set by anyone else, and without the constant feeling that he had to prove something to the world. There were moments when memories from the past returned unexpectedly. Old clips, messages from fans, or a familiar name would bring back flashes of a life that once revolved around cameras and constant attention. But instead of regret, Chad felt perspective. That had served its purpose. It taught him lessons about resilience, limits, and what fame truly costs. Those experiences didn't define him anymore. They informed him. At 54, time felt different. Every day mattered more than it once did. Chad became selective with his energy, choosing quality over quantity. The rush to keep up with expectations faded, replaced by intention. Projects were no longer about output or recognition. They were about meaning. Restoring a vehicle wasn't a race. It was a conversation between patience and craftsmanship. Walking away from visibility wasn't easy. Letting go of recognition felt, at times, like letting go of proof that his struggle had meant something. But over time, Chad realized fulfillment doesn't vanish when attention fades. It simply shifts inward. Peace replaced pressure. Purpose replaced performance. His journey became a quiet lesson about ambition. Pushing nonstop had nearly cost him everything that mattered. Stepping back wasn't weakness, it was survival. True strength revealed itself not in endurance, but in self-awareness. Chad learned that protecting his well-being was not a failure of character, but an act of respect for himself. Simplicity became his anchor. The familiar sounds of tools, the calm rhythm of hands-on work, and the satisfaction of steady progress grounded him. These moments didn't need applause. They didn't need validation. They were real, and that was enough. Chad Hiltz's story didn't end when the cameras stopped rolling. It transformed. Away from the spotlight, he found clarity. Away from expectations, he found balance. His life no longer needed to be watched to be meaningful. For those who wondered what happened to Chad Hiltz, the truth is quiet but powerful. He didn't disappear. He chose peace over pressure, purpose over performance, and balance over burnout. And sometimes that's the bravest decision of all.